The pre-dawn air in East Oakland carried the familiar symphony of Miguel Santos's childhood, the hiss of onions hitting hot oil, the rhythmic chop of his grandmother's knife against worn wood, and the gentle rumble of the food truck's generator coming to life. At 14, Miguel had memorized every sound, every smell, every crack in the truck's vinyl flooring that had become his second home. Mijo, the cilantro, Abuela Rosa called without looking up from the massive pot of pozole that would feed construction workers, office cleaners, and anyone else who understood that the best food came from places with no tablecloths. Miguel reached for the herbs, their bright green stems still damp from the morning rinse. His fingers moved automatically. Rough chop, not too fine, never bruise the leaves. These weren't lessons learned from cooking shows or culinary school. They were inheritance, passed down through calloused hands and stories told in Spanish over steaming pots. Rosa's kitchen wasn't much to look at. The truck's yellow paint had faded to the color of old mustard, and the hand-painted sign announcing Comida Auténtica had started to peel at the edges. But at 6 a.m. sharp, a line would form. Hungry people who knew that Rosa Santos could take the cheapest cuts of meat, the vegetables other vendors discarded, and transform them into something that tasted like home. Miguel's mother, Carmen, worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and serving tables at a chain restaurant during the day. She left before he woke up and returned after he'd finished his homework in the truck's cramped booth. Math problems completed by the light of the hood vent. Rosa had raised him between lunch rushes and dinner prep, teaching him that food was language, memory, love made edible. At Eastside High, Miguel was invisible in the way that kids like him often were. His uniform shirts, washed and re-washed until the blue had turned gray, marked him as clearly as a neon sign. He sat in the back of culinary arts class, watching classmates talk about restaurants their families frequented, places with names he couldn't pronounce, where single meals cost more than Rosa's truck made in a day. The culinary arts teacher, Miss Rodriguez, had noticed him, though. She saw how he corrected other students' knife grips without speaking, how he could smell when something was burning from across the room, how his mise en place was always perfect despite never having learned the French term. "Miguel," she said one Thursday afternoon as students filed out, leaving behind half-cleaned workstations and the sharp smell of burnt garlic. "Stay a minute." He paused, already mentally calculating whether he'd have time to catch the bus to help Rosa with the dinner rush. Ms. Rodriguez was young, maybe early 30s, with the kind of energy that came from someone who still believed she could change lives with lesson plans. "There's a competition," she said, sliding a flyer across the stainless steel counter. "Bay Area Youth Culinary Championship. Winner gets a full scholarship to the California Culinary Academy." Miguel stared at the glossy paper. Photos of teenagers in pristine chef coats, beaming over plates that looked like small sculptures. "I don't think the application fee is waived for students with financial need," Ms. Rodriguez continued, "and I think you should enter." That evening, Miguel showed the flyer to Rosa as they cleaned the truck. She studied it with the same intensity she reserved for checking vegetables for ripeness, her weathered fingers tracing the words she couldn't quite read. "¿Qué piensas, abuela?" he asked. Rosa was quiet for a long moment, steam from the cleaning water rising between them. "Your great-grandfather," she finally said. "He had a restaurant in Jalisco. Small place, but people came from 3 towns over for his mole negro. Took him 36 hours to make it proper, toasting each chile, grinding every spice by hand." She paused, wringing out a dish rag with more force than necessary. When we came here, we brought the recipes, but lost everything else. The customers, the respect, She searched for the English word, the dignidad. Here, we're just the truck by the construction site. Miguel had never heard her sound bitter before. Rosa was pride wrapped in flour-dusted aprons, the kind of woman who could feed 50 people from a kitchen the size of a closet and never complain. Maybe it's time, she said, handing him the flyer back, for someone to see what we really know. The application required a signature dish and a personal statement. Miguel spent 2 weeks perfecting his entry. Pozole rojo, the same recipe Rosa had taught him, but elevated with ingredients they could barely afford. Heritage corn from a farmer's market vendor who let Miguel work weekend mornings in exchange for produce. Chilies purchased with money saved from skipping lunch. The personal statement was harder. How do you explain that your classroom is a food truck? That your chef's knife is a $15 blade from the Mexican grocery store, sharpened so many times the steel had worn thin? That every dish you cook carries the weight of ancestors who cooked to survive, not to impress? 3 weeks later, a phone call came. He'd been accepted. The California Culinary Institute's downtown San Francisco campus looked like something from a movie. All glass and steel, with views of the bay that made Miguel's breath catch. The other competitors arrived in cars that cost more than Rosa made in a year, wheeling professional knife rolls and discussing sous vide techniques with the casual expertise of kids who'd grown up in restaurant families. Miguel carried his knives in a canvas tool bag, the kind construction workers used. The weight of his great-grandfather's molcajete, wrapped carefully in dish towels, made his shoulder ache. The competition was structured in elimination rounds over 3 days. 24 young chefs, whittled down to 12, then 6, then 3. The judges were intimidating. James Hartwell, the celebrity chef whose restaurants had made him rich enough to buy other people's childhood dreams. Susan Chang, the food critic whose reviews could kill a restaurant. Marcus Thompson, a James Beard winner who'd built an empire on elevated comfort food. In the first round, contestants had 90 minutes to prepare a dish showcasing knife skills. Miguel watched competitors construct towering vegetable brunoise. Julienne worked so precise it looked machine-made. He went back to what Rosa had taught him. Respect the ingredient, understand its purpose. He made salsa verde. Not the kind from jars, but the kind that required char, smoke, patience. Tomatillos blackened under the broiler until their skins split and their flesh sweetened. Poblano chiles roasted until the oils ran. White onion charred in a dry pan until it sang. Everything ground by hand in the molcajete. The volcanic stone crushing cell walls and releasing flavors that no food processor could match. The judges tasted in silence. Miguel watched James Hartwell's expression shift from skeptical to surprised to something approaching respect. Technique is flawless, Hartwell announced. The char work shows real understanding of heat management. But, he paused, and Miguel's stomach dropped. This is salsa at a culinary competition. Susan Chang spoke next. Actually, James, this is exactly what technique should be. Invisible. The knife work is evident in every component, but it serves the dish, not the ego. This tastes like something I'd fight traffic to eat. Miguel advanced to round 2. That night, in the hotel room the competition had provided, the first hotel room he'd ever stayed in, Miguel called Rosa. The connection was bad. She was probably in the truck, interference from the generator, but her voice came through clear enough. ¿Cómo estuvo, mijo? I made your salsa, abuela. They liked it. A pause, then Rosa's laugh, rich and knowing. Of course they did. It's good salsa. Round 2 eliminated half the remaining contestants. The challenge: create a dish that represented their culinary identity using a mystery basket of ingredients. Miguel opened his basket to find duck breast, farro, baby vegetables, truffle oil, microgreens. Ingredients that spoke to California fine dining but felt alien in his hands. Around him, contestants sprang into action with practiced confidence. A girl named Ashley began fabricating the duck with surgical precision, discussing confit techniques with the boy at the next station. Another competitor, Trevor, started what looked like a complex grain salad, his movements economical and sure. Miguel stood frozen for precious seconds. These weren't his ingredients, his vocabulary. This was the language of restaurants, where dinner cost what Rosa made in 3 days, places where food became art, but forgot to be nourishment. Then he remembered something Rosa had said: cook what you know with what you have. He broke down the duck, but instead of the expected French preparation, he created something new: duck carnitas. The breast meat, scored and seasoned with cumin, chili piquin, and orange zest, went into a hot pan, skin side down. As it rendered, he toasted the farro like rice for a twisted version of arroz rojo, using duck fat instead of oil, building layers of flavor that would have made his great-grandfather proud. The baby vegetables became escabeche, quick pickled with vinegar, bay leaves, and just enough heat to wake up the palate. The microgreens went untouched. Some ingredients, Miguel decided, were solutions looking for problems. Instead, he finished the dish with cilantro and white onion, flavors that belonged together like old friends. When time was called, Miguel looked at his plate with a mixture of pride and terror. It was beautiful in its own way, rustic, honest, but completely different from the precisely plated compositions around him. The judging seemed to take forever. Hartwell tasted the duck, chewing slowly. Chang tried the farro, raising an eyebrow. Thompson sampled everything together, the way Miguel had intended. "This is..." Hartwell started, then stopped. "This shouldn't work. Duck carnitas, farro prepared like Mexican rice, it's culinary heresy." Miguel's heart sank. "And yet," Chang continued, "it's delicious. You've taken expensive ingredients and made them approachable, familiar. There's real technique here, but it's hidden behind comfort." Thompson nodded. "This tastes like a dish with a story. I can see the influences, but you've made them yours. That takes confidence." 6 contestants remained. That evening, the producers arranged a meet and greet with local food media. Miguel found himself surrounded by competitors who spoke easily about their culinary school plans, their externships at Michelin-starred restaurants, their dreams of opening their own places in Napa or Sonoma. "So, where did you train?" asked a food blogger, digital recorder held between them like a microphone. "My grandmother's food truck," Miguel answered honestly. The blogger's expression shifted, suddenly interested. "Oh, that's charming, very authentic. And your plans after the competition?" Miguel realized he didn't have plans beyond winning. The scholarship was supposed to be the plan. But now, surrounded by kids who saw culinary school as a stepping stone to greater things, he wondered if he was thinking too small. "I want to cook," he said finally. "Real food. Food that matters." The semi-final round was brutal. A 3-course menu in 4 hours, serving the judges, plus local food writers and industry professionals. The theme was innovation, a word that made Miguel's skin crawl. His competitors unveiled concepts that sounded like chemistry experiments: spherified olives, deconstructed enchiladas, air flavored with various extracts. Ashley presented something called nostalgic carbonara that involved liquid nitrogen and looked nothing like pasta. Trevor crafted reimagined sushi using quinoa and vegetables spiralized into impossible geometric shapes. Miguel wanted to cook what he knew, the food of his family, his community. But doubt crept in as he watched the other contestants' ambitious preparations. Maybe his food wasn't sophisticated enough. Maybe honest wasn't enough. For his appetizer, he attempted molecular gastronomy, trying to turn agua fresca into caviar pearls using techniques he'd watched on YouTube. The spherification failed spectacularly, leaving him with expensive ingredients turned to flavored slime and only 20 minutes to recover. Panic set in. With time running out, Miguel abandoned the failed modernist technique and went back to instinct. Agua fresca as intended. Watermelon, lime, chile, salt, but served in a way that honored both tradition and innovation. He clarified the watermelon juice, creating a crystalline liquid that tasted intensely of summer. A rim of chile and lime salt. Simple. Perfect. His main course was where he found his confidence again. Cochinita pibil, but not the way it was usually served. Instead of the traditional preparation, he slow-cooked pork shoulder until it fell apart, then served it with fresh tortillas made from heirloom corn, the masa still warm from the comal, pickled red onions sharp with vinegar and habanero heat, salsa verde made from roasted tomatillos and poblanos. For dessert, he made tres leches cake, but deconstructed. Not because it was trendy, but because it made sense. Sponge cake soaked in 3 milks, but presented as separate components that came together on the spoon. The sweetness balanced with a touch of cinnamon, a hint of vanilla, flavors that spoke to childhood and celebration. When the judges tasted his menu, Miguel watched their faces carefully. Hartwell seemed surprised by the appetizer's clarity and brightness. Chang nodded appreciatively at the pork's tenderness, the way the acid from the pickled onions cut through the rich meat. Thompson actually smiled when he tried the dessert, but the critique was mixed. "Miguel," Hartwell began, "your technical skills are undeniable, but I question whether you're challenging yourself enough. This is good food, great food even, but is it competition food?" Chang disagreed. "James, I think you're missing the point. This menu has a clear voice, a perspective. In a world of molecular gastronomy and foam, there's something revolutionary about cooking this confidently traditional." Thompson was more direct. "Miguel, what are you trying to prove? That you can cook your grandmother's recipes with expensive ingredients, or that you belong here?" The question hit like a physical blow. Miguel realized he'd been asking himself the same thing for days. That night, he called home from his hotel room. Rosa answered on the second ring, sounding tired, but alert. "Mijo, how did it go?" Miguel found himself crying, not from sadness, but from confusion. "Abuela, I don't know what I'm doing here. They want innovation, but when I try to be innovative, it feels fake. When I cook our food, they say it's not challenging enough." Rosa was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of experience. "Miguel, when your great-grandfather first made mole negro, people said he was crazy. 36 ingredients? Who has time for that? But he knew something they didn't, that some things are worth the time, worth the effort. That complexity and technique should serve flavor, not the other way around." She paused. "Cook what matters, mijo. Cook what's true. The right people will understand." 3 contestants remained: Miguel, Ashley, and Trevor. The final challenge was the most intimidating yet, a 7-course tasting menu served to 50 industry professionals, including the competition's sponsors, local restaurant owners, and food media. The theme was simply excellence. Miguel spent the night before the finale not planning molecular techniques or Instagram-worthy presentations, but remembering. He thought about Rosa's hands, teaching his how to feel when masa was ready, how his mother would taste test salsas with the focused attention of a wine expert, how his great-grandfather's recipes had been passed down through whispered instructions and careful observation. The next morning, he felt calm for the first time since arriving in San Francisco. His menu was a love letter to his family's culinary journey, 7 courses that traced the path from Jalisco to Oakland, from tradition to innovation, from survival to celebration. Course 1, Abuela's Garden, a play on pico de gallo, but with each component isolated and intensified. Perfect brunoise of heirloom tomatoes, each variety showcasing different aspects of the fruit's personality. White onions so finely diced it looked like snow, its bite mellowed by a brief salt cure. Cilantro oil, made by blanching herbs in salted water, then shocking in ice, preserving the bright green color and clean flavor. Lime caviar, actual caviar from finger limes, not spherification, that burst with citrus on the tongue. Each element perfect on its own, transcendent together. Course 2, Memory Soup, pozole, but reimagined as an elegant consommé. He'd spent hours clarifying pork and hominy broth, using the classic French technique, but seasoning it with guajillo and ancho chiles, finishing with precise cubes of tender pork and individual hominy kernels, garnished with micro cilantro, chile oil, and crispy pork skin, ground to powder. Course 3, Street Corner, his interpretation of elote, Mexican street corn. Instead of corn on the cob, he served sweet corn silk, made by cutting kernels off the cob, then forming them back into silk-like strands using trans-glutaminase, coated with a light dusting of cottage cheese powder, chile piquin, and lime zest, served with a quenelle of creamer made from cultured butter. Course 4, The Crossing, a dish representing the immigrant experience. Masa harina formed into delicate noodles, served in a rich duck consommé perfumed with epizot, topped with duck confit that had been shredded and reformed into a perfect quenelle, representing the reconstruction of identity in a new place. Course 5, Sunday Dinner, carnitas, but elevated to restaurant standards, pork shoulder confited in its own fat with traditional seasonings, then pressed and portioned precisely, served with tortillas made from heritage corn and pressed tableside, accompanied by 7 different salsas, each showcasing a different chile and preparation method. Course 6, Market Day, vegetables treated with the same respect usually reserved for proteins, roasted poblano relleno, but instead of the traditional cheese filling, he used a mixture of aged Oaxaca cheese and huitlacoche, corn fungus, bound with egg and seasoned with epazote. The poblano was charred perfectly, its skin removed with surgical precision, the filling light and airy. Course 7, Celebration, tres leches cake, but presented as a modern dessert. House-made sponge cake, impossibly light, soaked with 3 Mexican-inspired milks, traditional cow's milk, coconut milk infused with cinnamon, and condensed goat's milk with vanilla and rum, served with dulce de leche ice cream and candied lime zest. Each course told a story, but together they formed a narrative. The journey of Mexican cuisine, from traditional to contemporary, from survival to celebration, from invisible to essential. As Miguel cooked, something magical happened. His movements became fluid, instinctive. The precision he'd learned from Rosa merged with techniques absorbed from watching other contestants, creating something entirely his own. When he needed to brunoise vegetables, his knife work was flawless. When he needed to clarify broth, his technique was textbook. But underlying everything was the intuition that came from years of cooking with love, cooking with purpose. The other contestants' dishes were technically impressive. Ashley created a stunning 7-course molecular experience that looked like edible art. Trevor's menu showcased global influences with precise execution and beautiful presentations. But when the judges tasted Miguel's food, something shifted in the room. The first course made Hartwell close his eyes and nod slowly. "This is pico de gallo," he said. "But it's also somehow more than pico de gallo. Each component is perfect individually, but together, there's magic here." By the third course, Chang was leaning forward, engaged. This is exactly what modern Mexican cuisine should be: respectful of tradition, but not trapped by it; sophisticated, but not pretentious. When Thompson tried the carnitas course, he actually laughed, not mockingly, but with delight. This is technique in service of flavor. This is why we cook. The final course sealed it. As the tres leches dissolved on their tongues, all 3 judges looked genuinely moved. "Miguel," Hartwell said during the final critique, "when you first arrived here, I thought you were talented, but limited. I was wrong. You're not limited. You're focused. You know who you are as a cook, and that's the rarest thing in this industry." Chang nodded. "Your menu tonight wasn't just food. It was autobiography. Every dish had a voice, a point of view. That's what separates good cooks from great ones." Thompson delivered the final verdict. "Miguel Santos, you are the winner of the Bay Area Youth Culinary Championship." 6 months later, Miguel stood in the gleaming kitchen of the California Culinary Academy, his scholarship covering not just tuition, but also housing and a small stipend. He'd grown taller, more confident, but his knife bag still carried the same $15 blade from the Mexican grocery store, now joined by proper French knives gifted by his instructors. He excelled in his classes, but something felt incomplete. The techniques were invaluable: proper sauce making, advanced butchery, pastry arts. But the soul of cooking, the reason behind it all, lived somewhere else. Every weekend, he returned to Oakland, to Rosa's kitchen. The truck looked exactly the same. Yellow paint still faded, hand-painted sign still peeling. But now, Miguel saw it differently, not as something to escape from, but as the foundation that made everything else possible. "Mijo," Rosa said one Sunday as they prepped for the dinner rush, "you're different now. More, how do you say, polished." Miguel looked at his hands, noticed how his knife cuts had become more precise, his movements more economical. "Is that bad?" Rosa smiled, the expression lighting up her weathered face. "No, mijo, it's evolution. You took what we taught you and made it better. That's what each generation should do." That evening, as the last customer walked away satisfied and the truck was cleaned for another day, Miguel made a decision. The scholarship was just the beginning. He would finish culinary school, learn everything they had to teach him, but then he would come back. Not to the truck exactly, but to the community. He would open a restaurant that honored both worlds: the precision and technique of formal training, the soul and story of familiar cooking. A place where a construction worker could afford lunch and a food critic could find revelation on the same plate. A place where his great-grandfather's mole negro could finally get the respect it deserved, where Rosa's pozole could be understood as the masterpiece it had always been. Miguel Santos had learned the most important lesson any chef could master. Innovation without foundation is just showing off, but tradition without evolution is just stubbornness. The magic happened when respect for the past met ambition for the future, when technique served tradition instead of replacing it. As he hung up his apron and prepared to catch the last bus back to San Francisco, Miguel realized he was no longer cooking to escape his circumstances. He was cooking to honor them, to transform them, to prove that excellence could come from anywhere if it was seasoned with enough love, patience, and respect for those who came before. The next week, he started planning his own recipe collection, not for a cookbook, but for the restaurant that would someday bear his name. Every dish would tell a story. Every flavor would carry forward the legacy of calloused hands and generous hearts, of families who cooked not just to feed bodies, but to nourish souls. In the end, Miguel Santos didn't just win a competition, he found his voice. And that voice, like Rosa's pozole and his great-grandfather's mole negro, was worth sharing with the world.